Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics. Is the Alliance Party weighing up going into opposition at Stormont? In her conference speech yesterday, Naomi Long told delegates all options are on the table.
Then rest assured, we will take a different course. Our continued participation cannot simply be taken for granted.
We'll ask the party's Deputy Leader Owen Tennyson what that means for Alliance. The Taoiseach and his team are making their way to Washington for St Patrick's Day. We'll assess how careful they'll need to be in their dealings with the Trump White House. And with me in the studio to reflect on all of that, Professor John Tong from the University of Liverpool. The Alliance Party gathered in Belfast yesterday for its annual conference. The leader, Naomi Long, dropped the heaviest hint yet that her party is thinking hard about whether or not it should stay in the executive on the other side of next May's Assembly election. Our political reporter Brendan Hughes went along to judge the mood among the party faithful.
Good to see you, and thanks very much for coming to the conference today.
A warm Northern Ireland welcome for the so-called King of the North. But is there a chill over attending an Alliance conference and not one for Labour's sister party, the SDLP?
Is it awkward? Well, no. I mean, I said very clearly when I came in as Mayor of Greater Manchester that I want to operate on a place-first basis, not a party-first. And I do think when we look at Westminster and everything that's been going on there and the situation with Mandelson and all of that, big reform is needed in Westminster, big reform.
But what about hopes here for Stormont reform?
Alliance really are in a bind in this, in that within the executive they can't progress it forward, they can't really move the agenda forward, even though they've won maybe a lot of the academic arguments around reform. There is no political appetite really from the DP or Sinn Féin to give up their vetoes, and why would they? It's what gives them relevance and power and leverage in negotiations.
The Alliance leader, though, had this warning for other parties in the executive.
Like everyone else, we have to compromise. But if we reach a point where our ability to deliver on our key priorities is either stymied by vetoes or frustrated by heel dragging, then rest assured we will take a different course. Our continued participation cannot simply be taken for granted.
Naomi Long has been leader of the Alliance Party for nearly 10 years now and says she still has the passion for the job. But will that continue to be from within the executive or outside of it in opposition?
You can deliver as a minister, but you can only deliver in certain areas. If the executive as a whole is not prepared to work together and cooperate, then there becomes increasingly little that can be done by individual ministers. And if that's the case, then maybe the big parties need to be held to account and spell an opposition from effectively an alternative executive would probably be good for Northern Ireland.
Yes, they have two ministers. They're not going to give that up lightly, but I think they should be saying that if we are going into the executive, here is our list of things that have to happen, and I would imagine that reform would be top of that agenda.
Hope, not fear, is the message. But when it comes to Stormont, is it hope for the best, prepare for the worst?
I think over the last few months things have definitely ramped up in Stormont and in the chamber. Some of the scenes we see have been a lot of confrontational interactions, a lot of aggression. I think that's definitely going on, but there is good work happening behind the scenes as well, and parties do need to work together if they want to deliver for people.
You've previously described Stormont as being a toxic thunderdome.
Yes, and that's where the fear of it is. People are trying to play in people's fears and that negativity, and we don't stand for that. We think that's important, that's challenged. We stand for a very different type of politics.
At their conference this year, the Alliance Party has sought to strike a more positive tone. Will that change the mood at Stormont? Don't get your hopes up.
Brendan Hughes reporting, and the party's Deputy Leader Owen Tennyson is with me now. Welcome to the programme. Naomi Long said in her speech yesterday, "Don't take us for granted." That sounds like a bit of a political threat, perhaps. Who's it directed at?
Well, no, it's not. It's absolutely consistent with what we have always said about our participation in the executive. We have always said that this is a delicate balance, that we weigh up where we believe we can deliver more and better for the people who elect us. I believe right now that balance is still marginally in favour of being in the executive, where Andrea is leading a radical reshaping of environmental regulation, where Naomi has been making good progress on speeding up justice and investing in things like our police service. But, as Naomi said, that should not be taken for granted, because I think the public right now are frustrated with being told to lower their expectations, frustrated with institutions which exist but which do not excel, frustrated of seeing progress blocked and stymied around the executive table. And we've been really clear, if that heel dragging continues, then we will take a different course. And both the two governments and the two largest parties at Stormont need to be clear about where we stand in relation to
It's
this.
interesting that you say that you remain marginally in favour of staying in the executive at the moment. And Naomi Long made it clear in one of the pre-conference interviews she did that this is a decision that could be taken on either side of the election, post-election, depending on results, but it also could happen between now and the election. I just wonder, how's that going to work? What is your message to voters now, and what might your message to voters be in 6 months or 12 months' time? Vote for us to be in government, or vote for us to lead the opposition and hold the government to account? Because it can't be both.
Well, every party worth its salt wants to be in government, because that, in the right circumstances, is where you can deliver the maximum change for the people that you represent. But of course, it depends on what happens with things like budget, with things like other parties' willingness to work with us as equal partners over the next few months. But also, we will set out our manifesto before the election, and we will judge after that election, as we do at every election, whether parties are willing to and up for the kind of progressive change that we want to see in society, whether they're able to tackle the big issues.
Okay.
And we'll make that decision on where we believe we can deliver more.
I'm not sure that'll be good enough. With
respect,
I don't know if that'll be good enough for voters here in Northern Ireland, but because of the mandatory coalition that we have and the system that we have, which voters are very, very familiar with, they know that the chances are most of the main parties are going to have the choice of being in government. Last time around, the SDLP didn't clear the bar. That's why it's in opposition, and the same goes for the other smaller parties as well. But of the four main parties, there's a very good chance they could be in the executive again. So you actually need to make it clearer to people. We're probably going to get the support to go in, but actually you need to know if you vote for us, we're probably not going to do that. That might turn some people off, but it might also switch some people to favour alliance, because they don't want you being in the executive, being trailed down by the other parties you say are doing you no favours.
This is how we approach every election. We set out our manifesto, we set out our priorities, and then we make a decision about where we can best implement those policies, be that in the executive, in difficult circumstances, a mandatory coalition is difficult, or on the opposition benches.
Do you know that the DUP and Sinn Féin, who are your partners in government at the moment, who are not making it easy for you, they're, in all probability, they're going to be in the executive on the other side of next May's election. You know that.
Mark, and we haven't shied away from holding the DUP and Sinn Féin to account, either from within the executive or without. I recall 2016 when we went into a meeting, and Naomi and David at that stage went into a meeting with Arlene Foster. It was Naomi and Stephen, sorry, with Arlene Foster and Martin McGuinness, with clear asks about what we would deliver in the executive. Arlene Foster banged her fist on the table and wouldn't entertain that. And given that level of disrespect and arrogance, we went into opposition to hold the DUP and Sinn Féin's feet to the fire. That executive didn't last. So our decision will not be driven by what is best for the Alliance Party. It will be driven by what we believe is best for the people of Northern Ireland.
Do you think that's the situation at the moment? Do you think you being in the executive is what's best for people in Northern Ireland? You do?
Absolutely it is.
Even though you can't do what you want to do in the executive, and you spend your time constantly criticising the other parties for not doing what you say they need to be doing?
I don't think that's the preserve of the Alliance Party. I think there's a lot of criticism that flies in all directions.
Of course there is.
But yes, absolutely. I am confident that Naomi and Andrew are making a difference. Can you imagine, Mark, what the shape of Lough Neagh would be if we had a DUP minister sitting in the Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs?
Well, it's not great at the moment, is it?
After all of the damage that has been inflicted over the past 2 decades, with the level of pollution that has been pumped into the loch, Andrew is not winning every battle, but I am glad that he is at that table fighting the good fight, looking at things like hefty fines for polluters, looking at things like tackling the wastewater pollution, looking at issues like ensuring that farming is more sustainable for the future. If Andrew wasn't at that table, those fights wouldn't be happening.
Okay.
And so I'm proud that we have Alliance ministers standing up for that kind of progressive and positive change.
And yet you're talking about the possibility of walking away from that and going into opposition. People will see that contradiction and make of it what they will. Let's talk about leadership. You're the deputy leader. Naomi Long is the party leader, has been for almost 10 years. Before that, she was deputy leader for 10 years. It's a tough job. She's a minister in the executive as well, of course. It's now 14 months to the next scheduled Assembly and Council elections. Do you expect her to lead the party into that election campaign?
Yes, I do, and I think anybody who listened to Naomi's speech yesterday will be clear that she's just getting started. I mean, I think there's a temptation sometimes to compare Alliance to other parties. We've gone through 8 leaders in our 56-year history. Other parties have gone through that in the past year, a couple of years alone. So So I think it's a sign of our strength and stability and unity as a party that Naomi has had a long tenure as leader. David Ford did 15 years, and I think Naomi has still got plenty left in her and plenty of energy to lead the party forward.
Okay, but it's an interesting point. I mean, she has said again in some of those pre-conference interviews that she feels that she's got the passion, energy and drive to lead the party and hasn't given a lot of thought to how long she'll stay in the job. At the same time, the party's performed well under her leadership. She's been seen as a strong asset for Alliance over that decade, but you will know very well, in January's Lucid Talk poll, she was rated as the worst performing executive minister in the executive. Late last year, she was judged to be the least popular party leader. If that remains the case, her leadership next May could potentially damage your party's performance? Potentially. Have you thought about that?
I don't believe so. I think the party is in the strongest position it has ever been in terms of its number of elected representatives, in terms of its influence in the Assembly and in local councils.
Why do you think those polls have found what they've found?
Partially because Naomi has been demonised by unionist politicians who see her as a threat predominantly, but also because Naomi and Andrew have taken difficult decisions in the executive. And so let's see where those polls are, Mark, come the executive, when people start to see the fruits of their labour, when people see the impact of the reforms that they're driving and the outworkings of the legislation that is currently going through the Assembly. So this is not about a popularity contest, this is about delivery, and we will see the outcome of that delivery at the election.
What about succession planning? I mean, that has to be happening within any party. Any of us could fall under a bus at any moment. I wonder who you think Naomi Long's successor will be whenever the time comes, because Stephen Farry, her former deputy, has now left politics. Saoirse Eastwood told me last year in no uncertain terms she's no interest in succeeding as party leader. And with respect, you're 27 years old, your seat wouldn't be one of the safest in the Assembly. Where are you on that issue of what comes next when Naomi Long says, I have had enough?
Well, she hasn't said that she's had enough, so there's no succession planning happening.
So you just wait until she says she's going and then you start thinking about it?
Naomi is leading the party into the next set of elections and will lead the party forward, and has given no indication that she wants to exit the stage, and has the full support of all of the elected representatives in the Alliance Party. As I said, I think that's a sign of our strength and unity, and that we're all pulling in the same direction. I'm confident that
it's a sign of strength and unity that you don't plan for the future. I mean, it's a serious question.
I am confident, Mark, that we have strong and talented people right across the party who would be more than capable of stepping up into that job if the time came.
But you know, people take out insurance policies and they don't expect their houses to burn down.
And we don't need an insurance policy, because we have strong, capable and talented people right across the party who would be more than capable of leading it. If Naomi, as you say, went under a bus tomorrow, I don't think that's going to happen, and I think Naomi Long is the strongest and most capable politician that we have, and is the right person to lead us forward.
OK. Look, after the highs of the Alliance surge in the three elections of 2019, local, general and European, there is a lot of conversation about whether or not the party might have plateaued. Now, Naomi Long has made it very clear over the last couple of days she doesn't think that's happening. She made it very clear in her speech yesterday that she sees continued growth. But it's going to be difficult, because you hit a high watermark in the last Assembly election. It's going to be difficult to retain that, never mind build on it.
Well, we're always being told that we've hit a high watermark. We were told that
you did hit a high watermark.
We were told that we wouldn't break the 10% barrier. We were told that we wouldn't have a seat in Westminster. I mean, I'm used to being the underdog in elections, because in every election I've contested, I've been told that I wouldn't win, and yet I won a council seat and a seat in the Assembly, breaking new ground for the party. So we're
never retained a seat at Westminster. Let's not forget that.
We're used to this Council of Doom, Mark, where people tell us that you've plateaued, that you've hit your peak. But I just don't believe that, because I see Northern Irish society that is evolving and changing. I see people out there who don't want this kind of culture war and keeping this sectarian pot on the boil in the Assembly. They want politics focused on the real issues, tackling the cost of living, reforming our health service, building a truly united and integrated society. That's what we will be offering people in elections next year, and I am confident that people will endorse that in strong numbers, as they have in recent elections.
OK, well, I mean, I'm not at all surprised that you'll take that line on a programme like this, but the reality is, when you look at some of the narrative from some of the experts about some of the seats that you're going to have to fight very hard to retain in 14 months' time, they are interesting. And your own in Upper Bann is a case in point, a seat gained from the SDLP. It's going to be a top target for Sinn Féin in 2017. In North Antrim, Patricia O'Lynn beat Mervyn Storey by 300 votes. The DUP are going to want to take that scalp back. In Southdown, Patrick Brown has gone. Sinn Féin will be hoping to take that seat from Andy McMurray. You know there are battles out there and you might not win them all.
And that's what elections are about. You set out your stall, you go out and you work hard and you fight for every vote. I don't take the mandate that we have for granted. That's why we're doing everything that we can with the mandate that we have available to us now to deliver change for the people of Northern Ireland. Votes are not owned by parties, they're owned by voters, and it's for us to go out and persuade and work hard for every single vote. And that's what we have done, and that's what we will continue to do.
Yeah. And look, I understand that. I'm just saying it's not going to be plain sailing.
No election is plain sailing. Elections are difficult for a reason. But we went out in 2022 and in 2019 before that and broke new ground. We now have a swathe of elected representatives of their community, working hard in their community, delivering positive change, and I'm confident that their hard work will be rewarded.
Right. You mentioned reform earlier, and I do want to ask you about that. You want to see reform of the Stormont institutions. That's been Alliance policy for some time. The SDLP is in the same place. The Ulster Unionist Party wants to abandon the changes made at St Andrews, return to the original spirit of the Good Friday Agreement. Even Sinn Féin now says it's up for some kind of reform in future. The question is, how do you move that debate forward, particularly when the two governments don't seem to be keen and the DUP doesn't want to give up its veto?
Well, the Irish government absolutely is keen. I met Helen McEntee last week and they were clear that they're up for a process of institutional reform. They're up and ready to have that conversation. The blockage to date has been the Secretary of State. And we told the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister this week, the Good Friday Agreement is the biggest achievement of the last Labour government. And if they are not willing to reform its institutions, then they are condemning the agreement either to death by 1,000 collapses or worse, death by a slow bleed of public confidence in the ability of those institutions to deliver. So if people want devolution to work, if people want to inspire the public of Northern Ireland rather than have politics be a cause for despair, we need to reform our institutions, to remove the vetoes, to end the stop-start government that has destroyed our communities, and to take steps forward for the future. We're making that case to government very strongly, and as you say, Mark, our campaign has pushed other parties onto our ground. So we're now building a cross-party coalition for change, and we're in a much better position than we were even just a few years ago.
OK, we've got to leave it there. We're out of time. Appreciate you coming in. Owen Tennyson, thanks very much indeed. Let's have a word with Professor John Tong from the University of Liverpool, who was at yesterday's conference. Welcome to you, John. Let's just talk. I mean, no surprise that Owen Tennyson should put up, a strong front and not take on board some of the questions that I'm putting to him there. On the issue of raising the potential threat of walking away from the executive, does that muddy the waters? Is that confusing between now and the next election?
I don't think we'll hear much more of that threat, to be honest, because which political party in the world says we're campaigning at an election to go into opposition, not government? It's not a credible strategy.
So why raise it in the speech?
Well, I think it reflects the frustration. I think Alliance have got two very difficult ministries. No ministry is easy. Ask Mike Nesbitt at Health. But nonetheless, what can be done about Loughnane, agriculture? Naomi Long's got a lot on as Justice Minister. There is a frustration that they're being stymied by other parties. And the threat to go into opposition is not to change the system, it is an option. But frankly, I don't think it would play particularly well with the electorate if it appears like you're walking off the pitch. And let's face it, where I disagree with Owen, I think we have seen peak Alliance. We are now into plateau Alliance territory. And so Alliance needs government for relevance. And remember that a clear majority of Alliance Party members want the party to be in government, not opposition. Yeah,
so Owen Tennyson today, Naomi Long yesterday say they don't buy this Alliance has plateaued argument. They see future growth there. Do you, when I talk about some of the seats that are going to be hard for the party to retain in 14 months' time, do you see where the growth could come?
Well, Naomi Long's argument yesterday was commentators underestimate Alliance because they don't realise that so many people don't go to sleep at night thinking about the constitutional question. And she's right. There is a big section of the population who don't think about it much, but they don't tend to go and vote. If you're neither a unionist nor a nationalist, you're far less likely to vote. And so the problem for Alliance will always be mobilising that section of the population. And Alliance has to be good in government because there's always a big pile of votes if you're a unionist party or a nationalist party based upon your constitutional position. Alliance has got to demonstrate competence in government to the exclusion of almost else, because that's how they're judged. They're not being judged on the constitutional question. It's hard to display competence in office if you are being blocked by other parties.
Yeah, and of course, Alliance has always done very well in the past with transfers from both flanks, from nationalists and unionists. And there are those who would say that the way things have gone over the last couple of years, that may dry up, and some of the transfers, particularly from soft unionism, may not be there next time round. And if that's the case, there could be an electoral price paid for it.
There are an awful lot of last count Alliance MLAs, it should be said, and who here thinks that Alliance will increase its tally from 17 at the next Assembly election? Be a brave person to put a lot of money on that. That said, we shouldn't get carried away. Alliance support has not collapsed if you look at those opinion polls. It's ticked downwards and it's within the margin of error of those opinion polls. So there's still plenty to play for, but the perfect storm that was there for Alliance after Assembly collapses in 2017 and 2022, that helped Alliance because it was a sort of plague on both your houses. Those factors are not there for Alliance at the next Assembly election.
And just finally and briefly, we discussed the issue of Naomi Long's leadership. It is interesting when you look at those polls, and look, the Lucid Talk polls are a snapshot in time. They're not a predictor of what is to come, but they're an interesting weather vane, if you like, on the journey to the next election. If it seems that Naomi Long was a big asset in the past and maybe isn't so much of a big asset now, what does that tell us?
Well, unionists have an unfavourable view of Naomi Long if you look at those opinion polls. Nationalists tend to have a favourable view of Naomi Long, and obviously centrists like Naomi Long. I still think she's a far bigger asset to her party than a minus. I certainly think she'll lead the party into the next Assembly election. And I think the successor, well, it will either be between Owen, who's half Naomi's age, or Saoirse Eastwood as the party's MP. I think that, it's a two-horse race.
Who says she doesn't want it?
Saoirse might say that, but, I mean, it may be a tempting prize still, notwithstanding the so-called ticking down of Alliance Party support.
Yes, Saoirse did say that, but we'll see what happens. John, thank you for now. We'll talk to you a little bit later in the programme. Of course, now it's only a couple of days to St Patrick's Day, and that means a lot of high-profile political figures from both sides of the border spending the National Day in another country. The Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, headed to the United States on Friday and is due to meet President Trump in the White House on Tuesday, and that could prove to be another tricky assignment. I'm joined now by the Press Association's Gráinne Ní, who's been keeping an eye on things. Welcome to the programme, Gráinne. Another year, another tricky St Patrick's visit for Mr Martin. Last year he had to box clever around the President, and with the US at war in the Middle East, he's got to be very careful again, doesn't he?
Yeah, if we thought last year's engagement was challenging, this one will be even more so because the context, the backdrop is even more chaotic. Last year, Micheál Martin had to contend with tariffs, the threat of those tariffs that kind of took up a huge amount of the year, and whether to raise issues like Gaza, Israel, Palestine, with Trump in the White House as he was getting pressure to do. This year, it's so much more complicated. You have the situation in Iran, the fuel crisis that is linked to that is really hitting citizens in Ireland and the US, as well as that earlier you had the start of the year. It was the US taking of Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, whose next court date is due on St. Patrick's Day. And then you also had the diplomatic threats over Greenland. So there's so much that has been teeing up in terms of diplomatic frictions between the US and Europe and the US and the wider world before St. Patrick's Day. And more than ever, the Taoiseach is coming under pressure to raise those issues with the President.
You never quite know what Donald Trump is going to do. He paraded Conor McGregor in the Oval Office last year. Do you think, for example, that President Trump's going to be aware that Sinn Féin is boycotting St Patrick's Day at the White House? And if he does, Gráinne, will he care?
I think Naomi Long said in her speech yesterday that, even though Alliance are boycotting, she's well aware Trump won't care much. And I think, that's kind of an awareness of when you're not there, Trump doesn't pay much attention to you. The other thing about this engagement is there's so much going on for Trump himself. He sort of needs this to go well. Will he kind of play it softly with the Taoiseach and with the Irish delegation in general, because he needs a kind of a PR win or a more softer kind of image to portray this weekend, and St. Patrick's Day is sort of the perfect opportunity to do that. So will he go on attack for people not attending the White House? I can't see that. The Irish embassy or the US embassy in Dublin were quick to say when Sinn Féin said they weren't boycotting that they weren't invited and that he didn't expect them to be invited. So there's no love lost there, but it definitely hints at a change in this very choreographed day that happens every year.
It'd be very interesting to see if the President is aware of the Irish President's comments on the war against Iran, because, of course, President Connolly talked about the attacks in the Middle East being deliberate assaults on international law. So we'll see if that comes up in conversation or not. I need to ask you as well about the fact that the DUP is going, other parties boycotting. I think the Ulster Unionists are going, of course, but the DUP delegation is being led by Emma Little-Pengelly, the Deputy First Minister. She's hoping that a lot's going to come out of that. And the position of Scots-Irish in the 250-year history of the United States of America might be something that is given prominence over the next few days.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something we're seeing more of, that politicians north and south of the border are emphasising the role people from the island of Ireland played in the establishment of the United States of America. The Taoiseach himself said that he would be emphasising the role of a Corkman who may have coined the phrase United States of America. And you see the DUP making a similar sort of pitch to kind of tighten those links and give the Irish or Ulster sort of American link a bit of grandeur and a bit of depth. And I think they will, Gordon Lyons said during the week he will be putting Northern Ireland front and centre of these engagements, which may not have happened in previous years.
OK, Garni, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's just have a final word with John Tong. Look, we all know dealing with Donald Trump is tricky for any political leader. Micheál Martin's going to be acutely aware of that. Keir Starmer's found that out to his own cost at various stages in the past.
I mean, good luck to Micheál Martin walking that diplomatic tightrope. I mean, it was always going to be the case the DUP would be there. They're quite close to Trump. At the last DUP conference, there was a lot of praise. There is a sort of MAGA wing of the DUP. The UUP think they need to be there as well. They say, look, America invests so much in Northern Ireland, we have to be there. There might be awkward questions about Trump's comments, for example, about British troops in Afghanistan, but I suspect it will probably go quite smoothly. And it was politically impossible for Sinn Féin, the SDLP, and probably Alliance to be there this year.
Yeah. What about that Scots-Irish contribution to 250 years of the United States? What do you think the DUP can achieve specifically on that this week? We know it's a big thing on the list of the Communities Minister, Gordon Lyons. Do you think Trump's interested in that or not?
Well, it's hard. Trump's so unpredictable, it's hard to say how interested he would be, but it matters a great deal to the DUP. They want to trump the Ulster-Scots link. Donald Trump has made very favourable comments about his British ancestry. He's often praising Britain. I think that what's interesting, though, is that whether the special relationship, so-called, it really is in jeopardy now, given his comments, his very negative comments about Keir Starmer in recent weeks. Clearly the mood has changed.
Yeah. Keir Starmer in Northern Ireland, of course, this week. Some people wonder if that was a convenient escape from Westminster or not. He was pressured about home heating oil. We hear now that the Chancellor, it was run in the papers yesterday, has found the money to do something to support households that use home heating oil. Higher percentage do here than across the water. How's that going to happen?
Well, I think there will be some money coming to Northern Ireland for that. I think there is potentially good news coming from the Treasury, because Keir Starmer is aware that 2/3 of homes here are reliant upon oil heating.
Well, we'll find out what happens, what the plan is. John, as ever, thank you very much indeed. That's all we've time for today. I'll be back with The View on Thursday, usual time of 10:40 on BBC One and iPlayer, when we'll be hearing from Washington. And before then, we'll have another Red Lines conversation dropping on Wednesday afternoon on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts. But for now, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Have a good day. From all of us, bye-bye.